It's live.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Crystal Spain, Chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, and like always, it is a joy to be with dedicated Democrats and concerned citizens. Tonight, over 2,000 people registered for this town hall. People like you who understand that our fight is not just about politics, it's about protecting our democracy, defending our freedoms, and ensuring that every person in South Carolina and across this nation has a fair shot at opportunity. Right now, we are facing some of the most dangerous policies we've ever seen from Donald Trump and his Republican foot soldiers. They're attacking voting rights, gutting our institutions, and trying to rewrite history in our schools while threatening the very foundations of our democracy. But here's the thing, they wouldn't be trying so hard to turn back the clock if we weren't making progress. And that's exactly why we're here today. Because when Republicans try to drag us backwards, Democrats push forward. We legislate, we organize, and we mobilize. And no one understands that than the man who we are pleased to hear from tonight, Congressman Jim Clyburn. Before we begin, I want to take a minute to ask each of you to consider signing up for our Democratic Action Alerts. I promise you we will not inundate you, but we are sending to our most committed activists instructions on how to take specific actions on a regular basis. So go to scdp.org, find the Take Action button at the top of the website, click the Volunteer with SC Dems, and under the Volunteer Activity, select Action Alert. Tonight, after Congressman Clyburn brings opening remarks, we will ask Congressman Clyburn to ask as many questions as we can get to. Some folks have previously submitted questions already, and if you haven't and you want to submit a question, please use the Q&A function and type your question. Please include your name, where you're from, and your question. There will not be enough time to get to every question, but I promise we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. Okay, so now for why we are here. Congressman Clyburn has spent his career fighting for justice, for economic opportunity, and for the fundamental rights of every American. He has been a guiding force in the U.S. House of Representatives, helping to pass historic legislation under President Biden, including lowering healthcare costs, expanding broadband access, and investing in good-paying jobs right here in South Carolina. Tonight, we have the opportunity to hear directly from him about the work that's being done to stop the extreme policies of Donald Trump and his allies, and more importantly, how we can take action together. Whether you've been organizing for years or you're looking for new ways to get involved, this conversation is for you. So let's get ready, let's get informed, and let's fight back. So please join me in welcoming our friend and fierce fighter, our leader in Congress, Congressman Jim Clyburn.
Thank you very much, Crystal, for having me tonight. And thanks to all of you who are joining us for this Teletown Hall meeting. I'm going to say just a couple of things. Most of you know me from my service in the Congress, where I've been now. This is my 32nd year serving the 6th Congressional District of South Carolina, but more the entire state. I'm the only Democrat serving in Congress from South Carolina, and it's been that way for a while. And so I have not allowed the congressional district lines to limit where I go and what I do. I serve South Carolina, a state I love dearly. I was born and raised over in the town of Sumter. My father was from Kershaw County. My mother was from Lee County. And I have had every one of my 84 years have been spent here in South Carolina. And I have always said that I do believe that we can be no more, nor will we ever be any less than what our experiences allow us to be. All of my experiences have been here in South Carolina, where I went to school, where I started my professional career as a public school teacher down in Charleston, where I served on the staff of Governor John West after running two community development programs in Charleston County. And then I went on to become head of a state agency for almost 18 years. And from there, I resigned and ran for Congress and was elected. I have one goal in Congress, and that is making every greatness that exists in our country accessible and affordable for all of our citizens. If it's education, healthcare, housing, energy, whatever it is, I want to make sure that it is accessible to everybody and affordable by everybody. That's why when Congress started debating broadband, well, they started out talking about infrastructure. I started fighting to make sure that infrastructure included high-speed broadband internet for all South Carolinians. And that's why this magazine that arrived in my mailbox the other day, South Carolina Living, the co-ops in South Carolina, refer to me as rural South Carolina's Washington workhorse. And I really believe that's who I am. And I'm proud to be called a workhorse. And I want to start by saying something else about rural broadband. Here's a headline that I'm sure most of you have not seen. And I want to read it for you. South Carolina is the only state where rural residents' access to broadband outperforms those of urban residents. And this is a whole story about my efforts in Washington to make sure that that happens. And so broadband is just one indication of what we're doing in Washington. Just remember, the other side, our Republican colleagues, many of them tried to keep this from happening, but it has gotten done. And we have done that for various other things. And so tonight, I want to answer your questions, but I want to tell you, in all my answers, you'll find this. Ever since I first got involved in politics, I used to hear people say all the time, we need to run our government like a business. I have always fought against that because I do not believe that government exists to be a business. Businesses exist to make a profit. Government should be given service. Government should be given safety. Government should be all about making the quality of your life better. And that should not turn over whether or not somebody makes a profit. That is what is so dangerous about what's going on in Washington as I speak. The other day, I issued a tweet talking about Elon Musk and his attempt to take over the the FAA, the Federal Aviation Agency. Why? All of a sudden, when I raised that issue, over 4,000 comments were written directed at my comments. Well, as they say over there in Sumter County where I grew up, a hit dog will holler. And that's why they were hollering, because they know that I do not believe that your safety on an airplane should be threatened by somebody's bottom line. And if we allow the Federal Highway Administration to be taken over by profit mongers, you will suffer with safety. That's what it's all about. And so I want to answer your questions, but I want you all to know that government should be there to serve, not to provide anybody a profit. Now, another thing we have to keep in mind is that the other side is well organized to discredit, to divide, and to do everything they can to exclude and insult. We've heard all this argument about DEI, getting rid of DEI. Well, Donald Trump has not gotten rid of DEI. He's getting rid of diversity, he's getting rid of equity, and he's getting rid of inclusions. But what he's done, he's substituted divide, exclude, and insult. He's got his own DEI. That's what we've got to fight against. We should not be divided over doing the things that are necessary to maintain the greatness of this country. This country needs to be made affordable and accessible for all of its citizens. It's already great. Doesn't need to be made great. We need to work together to make that greatness accessible and affordable for all of our citizens. And with that, I'm pleased to answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Congressman, for that, for your opening remarks. They're always right on point. So the first question, like we've got hundreds of questions, y'all. So we're going to try to get through as many of the questions as we can. But the first question comes from TJ over in Lexington County. Democrats seemed much more effective at pushing back in Trump's first term, even in the first 2 years. What is going wrong now, and what is going to be done to fix it?
Well, I think that's a great question, but I think we have to all focus on the realities of where we are. When Donald Trump was president the first time, I was the majority whip. Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House. I'll never forget the first time I ever spoke forcefully about infrastructure, including internet. It was to Donald Trump in the Oval Office, was in the cabinet room, and that was the time he said, we're going to have a big infrastructure program. Some people want 1 trillion. I think it ought to be 2 trillion. That's what he said. And from that day forward, he said, we were going to have infrastructure every week, and we never got 1 dime spent on infrastructure. We did what we could in the House of Representatives, but we didn't have the majority in the Senate. But we in the House were able to keep things in check. Today, he's got the House, he's got the Senate, and he has the White House. So that's why we are not able to be as effective now as we were then. That's why back then we were able to have a cabinet that could keep him in check. But as a result of last November's elections, we now have a majority in all phases. And that's why we aren't as effective as we were back then. And so we are going to have to suffer through this until this next election, which comes up in 2 years. And the question is whether we Democrats are going to work together, whether we're going to stop the division, whether we are not going to be taken over by all of these tweets out here. Let me give you an example. When I made my statement about the FAA, 17,000 people wrote that they agreed or tweeted. I think they called it their likes. 4,000 people wrote comments. One of the comments referred to me as Washington's angriest Black man. And that was a headline that went out in a Black-oriented newspaper. They mentioned the headline, they mentioned the 4,000 comments, left the readers thinking that 4,000 people had objected, never said one word about the 17,000 people who agreed. Now, I'm bad in math, but I did have my staff to check on that for me today, and they told me that of all those comments, 80%, to be exact, 81%, agreed with what I said. And if you put all the comments in the negative, and all of them were not, only 19% disagreed. But the headline makes everybody think totally different. And that's what they're doing all over. Misrepresenting, saying and doing things to divide, excluding, insulting. There's nothing angry about Jim Clyburn. I have never been angry. I just try to make my positions known. I may sometimes do it forcefully, but never with anger.
All right, thank you, Congressman. So Karen from Charleston County wrote, are there any Republicans bold enough to stand up to Trump in defending democracy here and abroad? Trump's recent remarks blaming Zelensky for the Russian invasion of Ukraine is preposterous. Is the U.S. no longer supporting Ukraine?
Well, it seems as if this administration is not supporting Zelensky. We just saw the president blaming Zelensky for starting the war. And nothing can be more preposterous than that. Russia invaded that country. And we, as a country, defended Ukraine up and down, all around, Republicans and Democrats. For some reason, the President Trump has an affinity for Putin, and no matter who is on the other side, Putin gets every shadow of doubt when it comes to Donald Trump. And that's where we are. I don't know how we get out of this. I do know this, that we are under threat of losing the confidence of our allies around the world, because Donald Trump seems to be more enamored with Putin than he is with the American people.
All right, thank you. So Nicole from Richland County asked, what is the best way to get started on grassroots level? What is the best way to get started at the grassroots level to help up and coming Democrats?
Thank you so much for that question. I think we need to start now. We're soon going to have, I think it's May 31st, we will have our Democratic convention here in Columbia. I think we need to start now at the local levels of looking at our school boards, our town councils, our city councils, our county councils, and begin to organize right at the bottom. Let's not wait for a governor's race or a House or Senate race, or we won't be Senate this time, next time around, or the congressional races. Let's use these local elections, these school board elections, and these town council elections to start getting candidates involved, start organizing, and start running people for office, not just because it's an office, but let's start sitting down, recruiting people, working at the local levels with our community-based organizations, our other fraternal and sorority groups. Let's begin to identify when the election is going to be, what the election is all about, and start getting candidates and organize around those candidates. I tell people all the time, if you want to get into politics, find somebody that you like and latch your wagon unto them, help them get elected office. That's how I got started, running campaigns. Well, I really just got started working in the NAACP from the time I was 12 years old. And then I managed a campaign for the first African American to serve on the Charleston, South Carolina City Council, St. Julian Divine. I ran that campaign, and that's how I got known in Charleston, and that's how I got started in politics. And so I would say to people, if you're interested, now is the time to get started. Get started at the local level. Look at the school boards, the town councils, and not just sit around and wait for a statewide election to get involved. Begin to learn how to do it at the local level.
Thank you. And I'll just add too, Congressman, that our county conventions are even before our state convention. So from March 1st to March 22nd, all 46 counties will have their county convention. If you're a good Democrat and you want to show up and support and get involved, that is a great way, that is a great entry point. And all those dates are listed on our website, scdp.org. So from March 1st to March 21st, every county in the state will have a Democratic county convention. I just wanted to just add that.
That's great. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the next question is from Lou in Charleston County. I'm concerned about what the SC legislature is proposing for DEI issues for our public institutions of learning. Seems like they have not conclusively grasped the importance or meaning of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What would you suggest for South Carolina?
Well, I think we've been doing great in South Carolina for a long time. I was on that committee that was put together by then Governor Dick Riley that looked at all of our higher educational institutions, the what we call it, the State Board of Education, when they first put out their statements on being inclusive. Remember, I started my career as a public school teacher. I used to teach in the Charleston County Public Schools, and I know that our books were not good for the students that I was teaching. On Charleston's east side, I couldn't find stuff in those history books that I knew. My dad started teaching me about all American history, especially Black history. This is Black History Month. And why is it okay for the schools in South Carolina to teach about Thomas Edison and his genius with the light bulb, but don't teach about Louis Latimer and his genius that provided the filament for Edison to put in that light bulb? That light bulb can't work without the filament. So when Thomas Edison came up with the light bulb, he couldn't make it burn correctly until he sat down with Louis Latimer. Louis Latimer just happened to have been the son of former slaves. His parents had escaped from slavery. A genius. So it is DEI and forbidden by these groups running around South Carolina, Moms for Liberty, trying to take books out of schools, whitewashing and brainwashing. That's what we're doing. Whitewashing our history and brainwashing our citizens to believe there's something wrong with that. I just did this past week a Black History Month for General Motors. We did a virtual meeting for General Motors all over the country. And I said to them, it's kind of interesting that General Motors making automobiles, that's great for us to learn about. So why can't we learn about people like Garrett A. Morgan, a Black guy who invented the traffic light? These automobiles be running around into each other, but for those traffic lights that we sometimes get impatient with. You can blame a black guy for that, Garrett A. Morgan, but that's not in our books. Also, this may be interesting to some of you, but you know, Cadillac is a division of General Motors. And Cadillac almost went under because they had a policy. When they started making Cadillacs as a luxury automobiles, their policy was not to sell their cars to black people. That was their policy. And all of a sudden, their sales plummeted and they were about to go under. They brought a guy from Germany who had worked for Mercedes-Benz. He came here, Cadillac hired him to go out and find out what they could do to turn the sales around. He went around and visited these dealerships. He came back and went into a meeting and said to them, there's nothing wrong with your automobile. You got to change your policy. If you don't change this policy and sell this Cadillac to everybody who can afford it, you might be okay. They changed the policy. Start selling to everybody. And Cadillac is still with us today. And that's why there's a headline that I should have brought with me tonight that says, Black people save Cadillac.
Wow. All right, going to the next question. Thank you so much, Congressman. Always a great to get the history lesson so we know where we've come from. So the next question is from Ann in Richland County. How much attention do representatives in Congress pay to calls, protests, letters, emails from constituents who are afraid, astonished, disgusted, and in disbelief at the action of this new administration? More importantly, as our representative, what are you willing to do about it? And what can we do to help you?
Well, thank you very much for that question. We pay a lot of attention to letters, to phone calls. In fact, my staff just briefed me this afternoon on what was going on with the comments. That's why I know about the 17,000 people that liked what I had to say about the FAA. And I also know about the 4,000 people that wrote comments. And the one person wrote the bad headline. So we do pay attention to it. And we do respond to it. All Congress people do. People who don't won't be in Congress long. And so if you have some strong feelings about something, even if feelings aren't strong, write us, let us know. People stop me in grocery stores all the time or just on the street. They tell me what they feel and I will listen. And sometimes I call my staff right away and say, I'm hearing something out there. I need you to check on this by the time I get back to the office. So we listen. And all I can tell you is this. We Democrats have got to do a better job of connecting with voters. For some strange reason, we don't spend the time on these tweeting that the other side will spend. We tend to really do the good things and not spend enough time telling people what we've done. And I'm guilty of that as well. It's not until recently that I started blowing my own horn, so to speak. I was always taught that was kind of unbecoming. You don't brag. Well, we got to start bragging because we are all doing the work. We are saving this country, and we are going to fight these attempts to take over our country. We're not going to sit idly by and watch the profit makers. I want them to make a profit. I buy automobiles. I buy groceries, pharmaceuticals. I want the people to stay open. I want them to make a profit. But I don't want anybody making a profit off our safety. making a profit of educating our children. If you privatize the Veterans Administration and you say that this person's health care has got to line up with my bottom line, that's not a good thing. That's why we call it service organizations for veterans. We don't call them business organizations. They are service organizations. That's what the VSO stands for, Veterans Service Organizations.
Thank you, Congressman. And he just put a finer point on that for you all. So when you get these action alerts and it says call your representatives, send an email, all those things matter. So don't think that you're doing them in vain, because it does matter and it is helpful. Okay, Congressman, we're going to keep rolling on through. Valencia from Richland County. I am a seasoned professional with over 40 years of expertise and a master's degree. After relocating to Louisiana in 2019, I returned home to South Carolina in 2023 when my jobs project lost funding. Now I'm earning just $14 an hour, significantly less than my previous $65,000 salary, and may have to relocate again. What initiatives are in place to support job growth and economic development in our community, ensuring that experienced professionals like me can stay and thrive?
Well, thank you very much for that question. That was one of the things that drove me crazy over the past few years. And I want to mention to you, let's just think about this. Big announcement, Scout Motors, 4,000 jobs here in Richland County. Big expansion of battery plants. There are 10 new battery plants coming to South Carolina. We have become the go-to state, creating these jobs. Now, all of that is not going to be under threat with these cuts that's coming from this administration. That's why we have got to stop this man from defying the will of the American people. Congress passed that Inflation Reduction Act that opened up these opportunities for people. The Inflation Reduction Act, that's the tool that's allowing these new facilities to be built all over South Carolina. The biggest industrial development ever down in Berkeley County, Redwoods. That's now under threat. Congress, reflecting the will of the American people, these things have been done so that people like you, I'm sorry you had to go, I think you said, or out of state. I'm sorry that job had to be terminated because of the loss of funding. You're back home now. Hopefully, you can find in these new developments that have taken place in South Carolina over the last 2 years, the kind of employment that allow you to stay here. That's what we're trying to do, trying to make South Carolina attractive for people to stay here. I grew up at a time, I sometimes mention this publicly, when I graduated from South Carolina State, 80% of my classmates left the state looking for opportunities because there were not any opportunities here. We've worked to reverse that so that young people growing up in the state, getting educated in the state, can look forward to being employed in the state, raising their children in the state, having a good public education system for them. Not taking money out of the public schools, putting it in the private schools, because let me tell you what happens with that. You are not going to be able to send a child to private schools, talking about with a voucher, when that voucher will be paying 50% of what it costs, when the person who's making 4 times the income you're making that 50% is fine for them, but it's not fine for you if you're making less than 50% of what they make in their in income. So that's why we have to do these things to make policy so that our children can be proud of their state, can want to live, work, and play right here in South Carolina. So I'm hopeful that one of these opportunities that has begun to be developed here in the state will give you an opportunity to find meaningful and productive employment to match your skills.
And just as you're talking about vouchers too, I also want to just remind folks that there's a voucher bill over at the State House that we are definitely against. And just to remind folks, even if it does pass and you do get a voucher, there's still an admissions process, so your child has to also still be accepted to the private school. But moving right along, Congressman Pam from Jasper County, what are Democrats doing to combat the obvious congressional power grab in the executive order, ensuring accountability for all agencies, and what plans do you have if he continues to ignore court orders?
Well, that is the danger that we're faced with today. Now, many of you know, I mentioned earlier, I started my professional career teaching history in the public schools of Charleston, South Carolina. I study history every day. I'm now putting the finishing touches on my third book. And this book is really a history book. It's about the 8 African Americans that served in Congress from South Carolina before me. And the reason I'm sharing that history is because I think it is important for us to know that there's a danger with this president, his power grabs, his ignoring the Constitution, his blurring the lines that exist between the 3 separate and equal parts of our government. The legislative got a role, the executive got a role, and the judiciary has a role. And if you decide that you're going to ignore the role of the judiciary, then I think we are headed for catastrophic consequences that none of us will benefit from. And that's what Donald Trump is signaling, that he is going to ignore court decisions that he does not like. That's going to be a problem. But I don't think it's just the Democrats' burden to hold on to this democracy. That's everybody. Republicans, independents, and even people who don't affiliate with anything. This country is worth preserving. It has not always done things right by me, certainly didn't do things right by my parents and grandparents. But, as I say so often, we have built a country repairing the wrongs that exist. When Abraham Lincoln saw a wrong in slavery, he wrote the Emancipation Proclamations. There were 2 of them. When the Supreme Court saw something wrong with segregated schools, they wrote Brown v. Board of Education decision. When Lyndon Johnson saw something wrong with our employment practices, we passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. When there was something wrong with our voting, we passed the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the 1968 Fair Housing Laws. All these things were done to correct wrongs that exist. As Alexis de Tocqueville said it, we were repairing faults. When we saw these faults, we did things to repair them. And de Tocqueville wrote that America's greatness is not that it is more humane than any other country, but rather because she has always been able to repair her faults. That's what makes us great. If there is a problem with the public school system, let's work together to solve the problem, not bleed it by taking money out of it and sending it to private schools and leaving low-income students to fend for themselves in the public schools. That's not repairing. That's avoiding. And that's not the way you build a good, strong nation.
Thank you, Congressman. Next question, Yolandis from Darlington County. Why does Elon Musk have so much authority and access to private information of the American people?
Well, because President Trump has ceded him that. When you're the president, you can name a lot of assistants to help you do whatever your agenda is, and you can give them as much authority as you think they could have, and that's where the courts have to step in. They're doing what they think they can do. We filed 78 lawsuits. 11 of those 78 lawsuits have been against Elon Musk. And it has, you know how slow the system is? And they're working their way through the system. But it takes time. Hopefully, we'll get some quicker decisions than usual. But he's going to keep doing what he's doing until the courts stop him. We can't stop him. We don't have, in the House, you need 218 votes. And we don't have a 215. We are 3 votes short in the House. And that's why we can't stop him in the House. You need 51 votes in the Senate, and we don't have but 47. We're 3 votes short in the Senate. And so we're going to be at his mercy unless the courts stop him or we stop him at the polls in 2 years. Can you hear your Chris?
Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We got so many questions rolling in. I'm trying to get to as many as we can. There's some of them are a little repetitive. Hold on, where what was I? So the next question that was just okay. What is the most okay, Christine from Lexington County. What is the most effective thing that constituents can do to respond to the reckless actions of the Trump administration and the hands-off approach taken by the legislature in conservative states?
Well, I think the most effective thing we can do right now is to begin now to organize at our local levels. You just mentioned county convention starting in March. I remember when I first started politics down in Charleston, you couldn't get into our precinct meetings and our county conventions. People were fighting over who could get to be delegates to our conventions. We aren't having that today. It's kind of hard for us to get people to participate. Well, we're reaching a point where we're going to have to really get back into the active roles that we used to play in politics so that we can start really winning these local elections. We aren't losing elections because we're being outvoted. We're losing elections because we're being out-organized, outworked. You'll find something kind of interesting. I won't name the county, but there's a county in my district where we looked at the other day, and we saw that Donald Trump's votes last year were almost the same as the votes he got in 2020. but he won big in that county because the Democrats' votes were 3,000 less than they were in 2020 in that county. So he was getting the same vote he got before. We got 3,000 less. We got to find out why that is and begin to turn people out. So they got more votes than we did, not because we were outvoted, it's because they turned their votes out for whatever reason, and we didn't turn ours out. And this is not the first time that's happened. I remember back in 1994, the same thing happened when Democrats lost 56 seats in the House of Representatives in 1994. Republicans got the same vote that they got when we won 70 seats in 1992, the year I got elected. And so we seem to win the election and then rest on our laurels while the other side keeps working. This is going to require hard work and dedication. We got to get back to doing it.
Exactly. All right, we're going to keep rolling, Congressman. Yokima from Lancaster County. Given that our party's traditional base is aging and demographics are shifting rapidly, how do we maintain our core values while building bridges to younger and more diverse constituents who might share our fundamental principles, but not our current messaging?
Well, I think that we've got to get young people to see the connection between what their parents and grandparents' needs are and what their livelihoods are. And let me give you a good example. We always talk about Medicaid, and we talk about Medicaid being for low-income families, Medicaid being for children. That's not true. Medicaid is there for our senior citizens. But if we don't have Medicaid to provide nursing home care and other kind of care that senior citizens need, it will impact our children, our young people. Our young people need to be able to prepare for their families and to, I think Kamala Harris called it the sandwich generation, being sandwiched between taking care of your children and having to take care of your parents and grandparents. That's what happens when you squeeze all the money out of the system. That's what is taking place now. If you cut money out of Medicaid and Medicare, which they're taking aim at, they're saying one thing and doing another. You're creating this sandwich generation, and young people will have to see how that affects them. And that's where we have got to up our game, so to speak, getting everybody to see how this is interconnected. This isn't a silo over here for senior citizens and a silo over here for young people. It is all interconnected. And that's why we're going to have to really get people to understand that this is not about them, but about us, all of us. And we've got to work together to keep and make that happen.
All right, since you brought up Medicaid, Roseanne, I don't know where Roseanne is from, but Roseanne asked the question, we have 1.1 million people on Medicaid. The GOP wants to gut Medicaid. How are we going to prevent this?
Well, we're going to be fighting it. We're going to be fighting it. And whether or not we win that fight depends upon whether or not we can get 2 or 3 Republicans to vote with us. Democrats are unified in support of Medicaid, in support of Medicare. These programs are necessary. Our nursing, and let me say something else about nursing homes. On the day that this first hit the news about Medicaid, I was meeting in my office with some rural healthcare providers. One of them happened to be on a hospital, but a wing of that hospital is nursing home care. And around the table, they kept talking about people needing nursing homes. And therefore, they need this Medicaid dollars. And I said this to them. You are talking about the beneficiaries of Medicaid. Well, let's talk about the people who benefit from Medicaid. There's a difference. Nursing home care, those are beneficiaries. But the people who own the nursing homes, they get a benefit. If you cut Medicaid money and they can't get into the nursing homes, you're going to have to put those nursing homes in mothballs. And you're going to affect these local communities that need people to be employed and other services. So he can't be so short-sighted or argue just about the beneficiaries. Look at who benefits. That is a different discussion that I'm having with every people I talk to these days in my office and around the state, and all of us need to have that discussion. We keep acting as if only the beneficiaries get hurt by this. You close up, terminate these people, and what's happened to the grocery stores? What's going to happen to the clothing stores? What's going to happen to Main Street in a lot of these towns? You are going to see a lot of whining and gnashing of teeth.
Thank you for that answer, Congressman. Okay, Adrian, I don't know where Adrian's from either. Adrian wrote, there is so much disinformation being spewed and many people seem to get their info from social media. I try to combat it as much as possible in the comments, but are there any ideas as a whole how the Democratic Party can get the truth out? There is a messaging issue where people, including myself, have to dig to find out positive legislation our party pushed, and they don't know their Republican legislators vote against their interest.
Well, one of the things I think we need to do is stop supporting the enemy. Elon Musk owns X, that used to be Twitter, I believe. Well, I've said to my staff, I'm going to spend my time on Blue Sky. I noticed in the last several weeks, Rachel Maddow, when she signs off for her show at night, that comes on at 9 o'clock in the evening, she signs off right around 10 o'clock. She says, follow me on Blue Sky. She didn't mention X. Why? Because Next is being controlled and owned by Elon Musk. So if we don't like what he's doing, why are we supporting his business? So my whole thing, I said, I want to be on Blue Sky. So I want all of you who want to follow me, who want to hear more of what I'm doing and what Democrats are doing, get your app. Follow me on Blue Sky. We can't be supporting the guy who is trying to take away your benefits.
All right, Congressman, since you gave that plug, we're going to make sure that folks, please follow us on Blue Sky at SC Democrats. Follow us on Blue Sky at SC Democrats. All right, Congressman, the next question is from Ian. The fact that you highlight rural internet as your opening accomplishment sums up the problem that Democrats have. That was not important to the vast majority of South Carolinians. Trump won the state in 2024 by a larger margin than he did in 2016 or 2020. Why aren't the Democrats resonating with the working people of South Carolina?
Well, let me just tell you how wrong you are about that. That is unadulterated wrong. Rural South Carolina, we had to close schools because people didn't have the internet. We had hospitals going out of business. We had community health centers. They needed the internet. People could not work. And the child cannot go to school. Those children who were able to stay in touch with education through the internet, they went on to the next grade. I had one of my granddaughters was able to stay in touch with education and went on to the next grade, but I had a friend who got left back because they didn't have the internet at home. We had children going down to McDonald's and other fast food places trying to do their homework on the internet. For anybody to say the internet was not important to rural South Carolina, I don't know where you've been. Nothing could be further from the truth. The most important thing, the healthcare in this state during COVID-19 was the internet. The most important thing, the education in doing COVID-19 was the internet. Come on, where have you been? So I was doing what I needed to do to meet the moment. But that's not all that I do. And I'd be glad if you wish to follow me on Blue Sky, you'll be hearing more about what I do and have done. But come on, don't spread that kind of stuff. That's really bad information.
All right, thank you, Congressman. Arlene from Richland County, will the DNC form a shadow cabinet with powerful leaders for each department, releasing regular press statements about the true state of the department? The public needs to know the truth about what is happening. South Carolina-based media do a terrible job of reporting federal effects on South Carolinians. So information from your office and the SCDP would be helpful.
Yes, I think, I don't know exactly what they're going to call it. I do know that Donald Trump is going to do his State of the Union address, I think is May 3rd or 4th, March 3rd or 4th. There will be a prenatal to prebuttal rather than a rebuttal to that. We're going to tee up some issues that you need to think about as he gets ready to address the nation. That's going to be done basically by House Democrats. I suspect the DNC they just had elected a new leader, will be doing something similar as a rebuttal to what the president may say during his State of the Union address. But look for us, beginning around the 1st of March, to provide some pre-buttal information to the State of the Union.
Thank you, Congressman. And I'll just add that we have been putting out a lot of information about not just about legislation that's happening in Washington, but legislation happening right here in South Carolina. We're constantly putting out press releases. We're constantly posting on our social media channels, Blue Sky. We still post some stuff on X, Facebook, and Instagram. And please sign up for our action alerts. So if you feel like you're not getting the information that's relevant to what's happening in South Carolina, please tap into the work that we're doing, and we're going to be ramping up more and more communication so that folks can get accurate information. The next question in the queue is, it's about the government shutdown. So I lost my place. From Kristen from Charleston County. It appears the government shutdown will likely happen since it appears to be the only leverage Democrats have with the current state of affairs. Is there a possibility that non-essential federal employees will become essential, thus being told to continue working without pay?
Well, I'm sure hopeful that we won't have a shutdown. Now, if we are forced into a shutdown because the Republicans are insistent upon cutting Medicaid and Medicare, it will be them forcing the shutdown of the government. Now, I wouldn't call that leverage by any means. I do believe that sometimes stopping bad laws, rules, and regulations may be just as important as creating laws, rules, and regulations. If we feel that they're putting up a budget that's going to cause crises in the homes of senior citizens, low-income families. We just saw the other day, they're talking about cutting 50% of the people who provide mortgages for low to moderate income people, cutting that staff in half. What is that about? So if that's the kind of budget they come forward with, no, we aren't going to vote for it. And we'll have to see what happens in the House. They can pass, in the Senate, they can pass anything they want in the House. They got the 218 votes. Now, whether or not the Senate will employ the filibuster that will be necessary to stop them in the Senate, that we'll just have to see. We won't be shutting down the House. They will be shutting down the House. Because remember, they got 218 votes. So if they put up a bill and fail to get 218 votes for it, it means that the Republicans are shutting down the House. We don't have the votes to shut the House down. Only they can do that.
All right, Congressman. Sharon from Georgetown County. Why is Congress not enforcing the Constitution?
Because courts enforce the Constitution. Congress can't enforce anything. That's not where the system works. Congress legislates. The legislature is the legislature. We legislate. We don't interpret the law, and we don't enforce the law. It's just that simple. The courts have to interpret the law. And then the administration is supposed to enforce the law. We already hear this president saying he's not going to enforce laws he doesn't like. That's when you have a constitutional crisis, if that were to happen. Now, I'm not too sure whether or not President Eisenhower enjoyed sending those troops down to Little Rock, Arkansas, when those folks tried to stop those children from going to Central High School. But as the executive, the law of the land, 1954 Supreme Court decision, had to be enforced, and he enforced it. He didn't sit back and say, I don't like that law, so I'm not going to enforce it. I don't know what Eisenhower's feelings were about integration, but he enforced the law because the courts had interpreted the law in Brown v. Board of Education. That's where we are today. We have no mechanisms to enforce the Constitution. That has to be interpreted by the courts and must be enforced by the administration. That we have no authority under the Constitution to enforce the Constitution.
Wow, we're getting some education tonight. Patrice in Greenville County, are the executive orders issued by Donald Trump enforceable like laws or just suggestions of how he wants the government to work?
There are suggestions as to how he wants the government to work. He can go ahead and do it until the court stops him. Remember, I want you to remember, when we pass, well, let's put it this way. When Joe Biden issued executive orders to do away with student loan debt he was taken to court by, I believe it was 14 Republican attorneys general, one of whom was Alice Wilson from South Carolina, sued him to stop him from implementing the executive order. And this United States Supreme Court stopped Joe Biden. It's kind of interesting to me, rather than people kept saying, Joe Biden didn't keep his promise on student loan debt. He was sued, lost the lawsuit. That's why that part of the promise wasn't kept. But he did keep the promise for millions of others on the perfect public service debt relief. I've got people I know who got two in one family between the husband, the wife, and children with student loan debt relief. One family got over $300,000 in student loan debt relief. One family. The husband and the wife and children all had student loans. And they had owed much more than they originally borrowed. But that wasn't true with everybody. That was public service debt relief. It was one of those parents was in law enforcement, another one was in education, and the children were in education. So they were eligible for public service debt relief. But the other part, the Supreme Court said that Joe Biden couldn't do it. And by the way, I think last week, another one of the programs left by Joe Biden, the court said it was unconstitutional.
All right, Linda from Richland County, what are we doing nationally to reestablish the brand of the Democrats? Right now, we seem flat-footed after the loss in November with no consistent and loud response to the chaos that is unfolding under our eyes.
Well, we're working very hard, but let me give you another example of what, I don't know why this is, but we seem not to want to fight. We seem not to want to believe what is taking place. I just talked about this thing with the federal FAA. Let me give you what I think is another example of this. We're a Democratic Party. And I have been saying to my Democratic friends, you are falling victim to misinformation in a very basic way. How many times have you heard good Democrats referring to us as the Democrat Party? That's not what we are. Look at our charter. I think the year was 1824 when the Democratic Party was created. It is the South Carolina Democratic Party. The other side keeps shortchanging us, and we started buying into it. And I got very upset during the election last year when I got this email from one of my good friends asking me for a contribution for a friend of his. And he kept referring to her as a member of the Democrat Party. And so I answered him. And I said, I have no problem writing this check to help your friend. And as soon as you write me a request with the right name of our party, I'll write the check. If I'm writing no check to anybody's Democrat Party, my checks goes to the Democratic Party. This is the South Carolina Democratic Party. And that's where this thing, we tend to want to really believe all the misinformation. We are victims of that. And we need to really focus on the fact that we are really unconsciously picking up the other side's foolishness. I found out about this stuff written about me being the angriest black man in Congress when my own brother sent it to me. My brother sent it to me and says, "What is this? You the angriest black man in Washington?" He got it from off the internet, and quite frankly, it was not from some Washington Post or the New York Times. It was from a black-owned newspaper in Georgia who printed the story that they got offline with that headline and never mentioned them 17,000 people who said they liked what I had to say, but mentioned the 4,000 people who felt otherwise.
Okay, Jerry from Richland County. When Democrats hold a majority in Congress, there are Republicans that seem to prevent activities from moving forward. The appointment of a Supreme Court justice during Obama's term is a good example. Why can't the Democrats not stop things from happening? Why can't the Democrats stop things from happening?
We can always stop it from happening when we've got a majority in the House, as we did time and time again. Remember, I was the majority whip when Nancy Pelosi was the speaker. We never missed passing the vote. Now, the reason I say we never missed passing it, there was one bill put on the floor when we were trying to keep the financial institutions open. And that bill was lost on Thursday afternoon. And we went back because the other side didn't keep their promise. We went back on Monday, revoted the bill, and passed it. So not a single issue came before the House of Representatives when we were the majority that we did not pass. We passed every one. You can't, if you need 218 and you don't have a 215, you can't pass the legislation. It's just that simple. We had people out here. We lost House seats in Pennsylvania, in Michigan. We lost House seats here in South Carolina that we should have won. But because the votes didn't show up, it was interesting to me. I lost Clarendon County the last time. I keep talking about this, Clarendon County. I mean, I grew up in Sumter, grew up doing Brown v. Board of Education, knew Reverend J. Lane, knew the Briggs family, Mr. and Mrs. Briggs and Briggs v. Elliott that led the Brown v. Board of Education, knew them very well. In fact, Mrs. Briggs used to do breakfast for me on Saturdays when I was running for the House of Representatives back in 1992. Knew all of them. Been working that county all of my life. Doing broadband, doing housing, education. I lost the county the last time. Why? Very simple. Those people who benefited didn't show up to vote. Didn't show up. I don't quite understand that. And that's happening all over. And there were people going to the polls saying to us, one fellow said to a cadre who was running for the House himself, cadre lost, a product of those schools. And he lost to somebody who just moved into Clarendon County. He'd been there all of his life. His daddy was a coach over there, mother, educator, grandparents. But he lost to somebody who just moved into the county and decided that he was not good enough. I don't know. I think we need to take a look at this. it is happening in other counties as well.
Absolutely. It's a rough time to be Democrats in South Carolina, to be a Democrat in South Carolina, but we're still here and we're still fighting. Okay, Congressman, I think we've got time for two more questions. So Tyler, he didn't give where he was from, wrote, thanks for all that you do. With the cuts to NIH and USAID, it will impact our farmers and universities. Where will the money come from now that with those grants and funding for research? Additionally, how do we make this known more throughout the state, the damage that has been done to help drum up some more support for the next election?
Well, we're going to have to spread the word, not just on the cuts at USAID. We've got to show those farmers, remember, and just think about this, the farmers that are going to be hurt by these cuts. Many of them are members of farming organizations that are supporting Republicans. They support Republicans. They support them in the last election. And now they're not going to be able to sell this food. They're growing soybeans all over the PD. Those soybeans go out of the Wilmington port all over the country. And the people they were selling the soybeans to, the offices are now closed. The people have been laid off. So who are they going to sell the soybeans to? What we've got to do as Democrats, as I just talked about with Medicaid, we're going to have to focus on the end of the road, so to speak. The last mile when we talk about the internet. We can't just focus on the fact that they're cutting the USAID money up in Washington. No, when you did that, you cut that farmer's income down there in Florence County, in Horry, in these rural counties where they're growing soybeans. That's what you did. You cut that farmer's income, not somebody overseas that you never saw. No, the person who goes to church with you every Sunday, person who your children go to school with, that farmer's income just got cut by this administration, and they're doing it across the board. So when you start talking about the cuts up in Washington, just think about the impact here in South Carolina. That's what is going on. Putting profit over people, putting politics over people. We Democrats have always put people over politics, but people seem to prefer being ruled by politics.
Mm. All right, the last question, and you got a similar question like this earlier, but this gets a little bit of a different spin. This is Alex from Pickens County. Are there any plans to use a government shutdown as leverage to get concessions from Republicans and the administration?
I don't think so, and I hope not, because I do not believe in cutting off one's nose to spite the face. Who will be hurt the most by shutting down the government? I hope that we can get to a good place where Democrats and Republicans can find common ground. I may not like all of it, but I don't want to see the government shut down. Because when the government shut down, everybody gets hurt, but people who depend upon the government will get hurt the most. So I would hope that we can get this done with both sides finding common ground. You know, you said that was the last question. Let me close by saying this. Some time ago, I wrote a letter to the Washington Post some several years ago. Someone said something that I thought was unbecoming. And I said, if the distance between me and an opponent on any issue or 5 steps, I don't mind taking 3 of them. That to me is what this is all about. I'm not here to score points when it comes to the other side. I'm here to do everything I can to make sure that little children get a fair chance in life. Nobody asked to be born with diabetes. My late wife battled diabetes for 30 years, lost her kidneys, had 5-vessel bypass surgery, had a stroke, back operation, all of this from diabetes. She had good insurance. But a child born with diabetes in a family with no insurance ought to be able to have Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, in order to have a better quality of life. You've got a president that now says he's going after Medicaid. He wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. My question to you is, what happens to that child? What happens to the senior citizen in need of nursing home care and can't get it because we've gotten rid of Medicaid? What happens? Government should not be about anybody's bottom line. We ought not be running government so Elon Musk can make another $1 billion. Our government should be about taking care of its people, providing service for its men and women who have made sacrifices to keep this a free and productive nation. They have given their all, some the ultimate, and we are going to take away what little health care, what little security, what little safety measures they've got. I don't understand how we can feel good about ourselves and call ourselves a great country doing that kind of stuff to the people who got us to where we are. I would hope that we Democrats will not lose the will to fight this. And these are my final words. I used to challenge the status quo. I spent nights in jail fighting to get off the back of the bus, fighting to be able to sit down at the lunch counter, fighting to be able to get textbooks in schools with subject matters that look like me. I fought for that. And throughout all of those fights, I never felt that in the final analysis, my country would not be there for me. That's why we got a 9-0 decision at the Supreme Court in 1954. That's why we got the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Law, because our country was there to right some wrongs that existed. I would hope that we are not going back to those wrongs, but I'm fearful that too many people feel that that's the way to go. When people told me that they were not going to vote for Joe Biden because they didn't think that he yelled loud enough, his style, well, substance means more than style. We voted for style, and substance seems to be ebbing away. That is not good for our children and grandchildren. We're a better country than that.
Wow, thank you so much, Congressman. Thank you for those closing remarks, and thank you for all the questions that you answered. We had over 400 questions to kind of weed through. I don't know exactly how many we got to, but we got through a lot of them. But just thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you so much for everybody who stayed on throughout the entire time. But I also want to make sure that folks know, if I know people are chomping at the bit to do something. We have real elections where we can be helpful. Over in Florida or down in Florida, there are two congressional elections that are happening, and we're going to be sending out information on how you can help in the Florida's first, and I can't remember the other congressional district, but they've got special elections coming up April 1st. I spoke with their chair earlier this week, and we're going to start sharing information on how you guys can help support their candidates. And also, we have a special election here in Lee County, House District 50, I believe, where one of the Democratic members has resigned. So that election is going to be happening as well. So if you want to get engaged, you can get engaged over there to make sure that the Democrats hold that seat, and that we don't lose another seat. And so again, just making sure that you guys are plugged into us. Please, please, please go to our website and sign up so that you are engaged and plugged in and that you can take action. Again, thank you so much, Congressman. Thank you for everything that you've done and that you will continue to do as we fight to try to save our country from total demise, as I would say. But I know that we're in good hands as long as you are there and fighting for us. So thank y'all so much, and please have a wonderful evening.